Hello, this is Elliot at the Audible Local Ledger with the Cape Cod Chronicle for Thursday, September 19th. Beach Road Path Opposition. Advocates Residents Disagree Over Safety by Ryan Bray. As efforts to explore the feasibility of creating a multi-site pathway along Beach Road out to Nauset Beach are set to get underway, a group of residents have organized in opposition to the project. Save Beach Road includes between 20 and 30 residents on and in the area of Beach Road who've stood up in recent months against the proposal, which they say will adversely impact the rural character of the road stretching from the end of East Main Street out to the beach. All I want to say is this is not the Jersey Shore or Orange County, California, said Catherine Stevens, a Beach Road resident and group member. This is Cape Cod, Patty Page. This is how it's always been. Keep it at that. In May, town meeting voters authorized spending $85,000 to fund a feasibility study to explore options for creating a multi-use path that would make the road safer to travel for cyclists, pedestrians, and other non-motorists. Beach Road, which does not have sidewalks, is one of the town's busiest in terms of vehicle traffic, especially during the summer months. On September 11th, the town's Traffic and Bikeways Advisory Committee voted to advance a contract with the Watertown-based engineering design firm VHB to begin work on the study. The money, authorized at an annual town meeting, will be used to pay for the firm's services, and the contract needs to be executed by town manager Kim Newman. The sooner we can move on, then at least we can start the preliminary work for Beach Road so we'd be able to provide more comment or take public comment back, said Rich Waldo, the town's public work director, who also sits on the advisory committee. The draft contract with VHB identified 3 design options for study. One involves the construction of a 5-foot on-road bicycle lanes with a Cape Cod berm with a 3-foot grass buffer and 5-foot sidewalk on the south side of the Beach Road. A second option calls for a 10-foot side path with a Cape Cod berm and 3-foot grass buffer on the road's south side, while a third option would be a hybrid design, where a path would be on the roadway in some stretches and off-road in others. A fourth option involving 5-foot on-road bicycle lanes, granite curbing, and a 5-foot sidewalk on the south side of the road has been dismissed by the committee, but Waldo said in an email last week that the committee will hold reservation to proposing a fourth design alternative in the future. Waldo said that the study will begin by identifying any design constraints that currently exist along the road. These could include the placement of utility poles or rock walls, as well as any easements or deed restrictions in the area. What are the limiting elements, he said. What are the hard objects we can't walk around? Committee Chair Alice Tomlinson said 3 letters of support for the project into the record September 11th. The letters referenced a number of safety issues that come with traveling Beach Road, including distracted drivers, pedestrians, sun glare that impacts drivers' visibility, and pedestrians and cyclists that do not always follow the rules of the roadway. George Clayton, a 45-year resident of East Orleans, said in his letter that his first ever accident involved a cyclist who moved into traffic to avoid pedestrians walking along the side of the road. While I recognize this was my fault, it could have been avoided if we had a proper bike and walkways, he wrote. Others referenced an accident from May 2015 in which 6 female pedestrians walking to the beach were injured by a vehicle. In their letter, Brad and Diane Moore Dodge said that they found it dangerous to walk along the road, even for such a short time. They added that a multimodal path would improve real estate values and the desirability of the area. But not everyone agrees. Members of the Save Beach Road group, after the meeting, said that the project would adversely change the nature not just of the road, but of Orleans as a whole. When you change the culture of a street, you change the culture of a town, said Bill Weibel. Weibel also said the project will yield very little return on investment, and that plans to build a path are short-sighted. He said the town needs to take long-term issues such as the potential effects of climate change on the area into consideration. Any alternative that they're going to propose, I would hope they would plug in and do some forward thinking about what society is going to look like, what the impact of climate change is going to be on the beach, he said. The beach may not be here in 20 years. There may be no parking lot there. With regards to pedestrian and cyclist safety, group members said that the non-motorists need to pay attention and exercise caution when using the road. Rhodey Thompson of Save the Beach Road Group said in the case of the May 2015 accident, a group of women were walking abreast into the roadway. Thompson said for Beach Road residents, being cognizant of vehicle traffic is just part of living along the busy street. You have to look, she said. Thompson also criticized the advisory committee of being partisan in its processing during September 11th meeting. Specifically, she questioned why the committee did not read letters submitted by the Save Beach Road group into the record the same way it did the 3 letters of support. Peter Algieri of the advisory committee said those letters were reflected in the minutes of the committee's August meeting, which had not been yet approved and accepted by the committee. After the meeting, Thompson said Beach Road residents need the opportunity to voice their thoughts and concerns about the project. Ask us first, she said, because if I'm a select person, I'm going to say, have you contacted the residents? But members of the advisory committee say the public comment will not only be part of putting together the feasibility study, it is already well underway. Thompson said that the public support for the studying the path has been confirmed not just through the Springtown meeting vote, but through public forums held as part of efforts to put together the town's complete streets prioritization plan and a revised local comprehensive plan. The advisory committee also solicited input from 8 local boards and committees regarding studying the multi-use path, she said. We very much understand the anxiety that some of the abutters have, but we're hoping that they see that we are very much doing outreach. Stevens, meanwhile, said it is assumed by beach residents that any plan for a path will involve taking or easement of private property to accommodate it. We don't know that yet because we haven't entered into a feasibility contract yet. Waldo said the group is to look at all those scenarios for any limitations they may have. But while specifics are lacking without a study, which Waldo said could be completed by January, Thomason said that the town's goal is to minimize any potential takings or easements as much as possible. We know the easement issue is huge, and the town is not about to go start taking people's front lawns. Others at the September 11th meeting raised concerns with environmental impacts that would come with the creation of a multi-use path. Orleans resident Nancy Wren said a major removal of trees and plants would be needed along the road to accommodate the proposed path. The trees play a crucial role in mitigating the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, she said. As the town of Orleans advances towards climate agendas, the significance of trees often remains undervalued. This isn't the first time that plans for transportation improvements along Beach Road have run into opposition. In 2011, a plan to install sidewalks along the road failed to move forward. Safety may be on top of mind when it comes to studying the feasibility of a multi-use path, but advisory committee members say that they also recognize the importance of keeping the country character of Beach Road as they work towards a plan. It's a balance of all, Waldo said. I think all transportation projects are the balance of all, but that's what makes them so difficult. It's about trying to find where that line of balance lies. Voters OK 90th Street Bridge by an ample margin by Alan Pollock. Prompting a chorus of cheers and applause, special town meeting voters threw their support behind the 90th Street Bridge waterfront project Monday evening. On a 462 to 99 vote, they authorized spending another $4 million to finish the building the pier, floats, and a new shellfish upweller in the restored Coast Guard boathouse near the Mitchell River Bridge. The article won the endorsement of Select Board Finance Committee, Shellfish Advisory Committee, and other groups like the South Coast Harbor Plan Committee, on which Ernie Eldridge serves. We've been in full support of this project from its conception, which was 10 years ago, he said. Also, I'm here as a longtime fisherman and shell fisherman, and I would ask and encourage everyone here to vote in support of this, so that future people can enjoy what I've enjoyed all my life. The article sought $4 million to complete all three phases of the $11 million project. The first phase, the dredging and bulkhead replacement, are expected to be complete by the end of the month. In the second phase, contractors will install new piers and floats that provide space for recreational and commercial boaters. The final phase involves the installation of the historic boathouse and its renovation to house the new upweller. The upweller's most important tool in the town's propagation system, shellfish constable Renee Gagne told voters, used to grow sea quahogs large enough so they could be released to the wild for harvesting. The current upweller at Old Mill Boatyard is jury-rigged and unreliable. The program ensures that Chatham remains the most lucrative wild-caught commercial quahog shell fishery in the state of Massachusetts, she said. This program directly supports our local commercial shell fishermen, all of whom are year-round domiciled residents. Housing the new system in the restored Coast Guard boathouse, which stood guard just across the harbor for many decades, will bring back a piece of our waterfront history and its connections to the rich maritime history that defines our coastal communities, Gagne said. Opponents of the article focused largely on its costs, which is expected to add between $25 and $50 to property tax bills starting in fiscal 2026. Resident Debbie Swenson said she cannot support the project. It is not a vote against shell fishermen or the need for shellfish seed, she said. It is a vote against the project with a building that is beyond repair and too large for the site and has an exorbitant cost. Swenson and others at the meeting argued that the town is using a dubious approach to authorizing the borrowing for the project. In May, annual town meeting voters rejected an $11 million bond issuance for 5 waterfront projects, including 90 Street, but in the town election that followed, voters approved the necessary Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion. On the advice of town council, town officials are using that debt exclusion to vote to authorize the new standalone 90 Bridge Street article. It seems that the town government representatives selectively chose which of our votes to accept, she said. I can't vote for it. I just can't, resident John Hewlett said. The cost of the project is too high, he noted. Hardly any of the people in the lobby here have to say about putting this old building on the property. If I was going to spend $11 million, I would have voted for the Council on Aging. The project also failed after the town relief on a previous approved bond authorization. Using this loophole that we used for the Council on Aging, which was a new discovery, is setting a really bad precedent, resident Aline Gibbs said. Town meeting is not a suggestion. But the project's merits swayed the majority of voters, like Frank Messina of the Historical Commission, who said the town struggled for years to find ways to preserve the Coast Guard boathouse. It looked like it was finally going to be demolished and put away, and then serendipity. All of a sudden, the town of Chatham needed a 30 by 60 building. The boathouse happens to be 30 by 60. The town has a historic connection to the Coast Guard, including the famed Pendleton rescue in 1952, and the adaptive reuse of the boathouse would deepen that connection, Messina said. As for the sturdiness of the building, Messina said, he's not worried. They built them to last, he said. Similar boathouses remain in place on Nantucket and Cuttyhunk, he noted. Ellen Briggs of Protect Our Past of the town turned down the chance to save the historic CG 36-500 rescue boat used in the Pendleton rescue, which is now being preserved in Orleans. You all know we lost the boat. I can tell you Orleans is not going to give it back, she said. We have an opportunity here. Please, let's not lose that. Resident Tracy Shields, a member of the Finance Committee, said the 90 Bridge Street project is important to preserve what makes Chatham special. She's been coming to Chatham since her great-grandparents bought a home in North Chatham. and each grandparent teaches the next grandchild about Chatham and going clamming. It kept us all coming back here. And I've now raised my son here, who's now spent his third summer as part of the commercial fleet. He loves it. It's a cultural part of keeping us tied to the physical land and water, she said. As a restaurateur, she sees value in having locally sourced shellfish, particularly when the food supply chain is disrupted as during the pandemic. Then she and others turn to shell fishermen for fresh protein for people who are struggling. We donated time, and we made huge batches of clam chowder and distributed them to the seniors and to some families struggling with food insecurity. Voters cut off further debate in less than an hour, approving the project on a vote of 462 to 99, more than the requisite two-thirds, town-moderated Bill Litchfield noted. Brooks Academy becomes a battleground by William Galvin. Town officials are feuding over the status of an occupancy permit for the Brooks Academy and the extent of work needed to open the historic building to the public. Whether only the first floor of the historic building should be open to the public, when that should happen, how the remaining work should be funded, and why a meeting with state officials over a waiver from access regulations are among the issues in contention. The Select Board is considering calling a special town meeting in November that could include using free cash to fund the renovations that remain to be made to the building. But it's unclear whether the meeting will be called and whether funds from free cash will be available for the project. The town had planned a meeting to the State Architectural Access Board, AAB, to discuss a waiver for use of the first floor of the building, but the session was canceled without notice to the Stakeholders Subcommittee, according to Select Board members Donald Howell, who chairs the group. Howell said the group adjourned its initial meetings in July with the understanding that it would pursue a waiver from the AAB. Neither Howell nor the stakeholder group were informed that the meeting was canceled. For the record, nobody conveyed any of this to me, Howell said at the September 4th Select Board meeting. It was already a fait accompli. The historic building, which houses the Harwich Historical Society and Brooks Academy Museum, has been shuttered for a year and a half while the construction work was conducted on the 1848 structure. The cost associated with the construction has driven the need for the town to meet public access requirements for the facilities. An elevator is needed to provide access to the basement and second floor, but there's no funding for an elevator. There are funds available for additional work, including exterior improvements and new windows. The stakeholders group has called for the creation of a comprehensive plan that will address all the needs of the building. At the September 4th meeting, Select Board member Jeffrey Handler said Facilities Maintenance Manager Sean Libby and Town Administrator Joseph Powers came to the conclusion that because the town is looking for access to only the first floor, the waiver could be handled in-house by the town's building commissioner. Howell took issue with the cancellation of the state meeting, saying that everyone left stakeholder session in unanimous agreement the town would request a waiver from the AAB to allow access to the first floor and would strive for completion of the work by seeking additional funds in the contemplated fall special town meeting. If the building commissioner has authority to grant a waiver for the first floor access, why did that not happen earlier so the building could be open for the summer, Howell said. Under whose authority did we make the decision to cancel that meeting, he asked. On Monday night, Town Administrator Joseph Powers said that after the stakeholder meeting, Doug Manley, the architect for Spencer Preservation Group, which is overseeing the Brooks Academy renovations, said the change in plans seeking occupancy permit for just the first floor should not go to the AAB and that a waiver could be issued through the building commissioner. Manley's letter was given to Libby, who brought it to Powers, who said that he signed it and canceled the state meeting. Powers said Manley and Libby were working with the building commissioner on a temporary occupancy permit. Howell wanted to know when Powers anticipated the permit would be issued. Powers said the building commissioner is still waiting on information from Manley and Libby. The occupancy permit would be issued in this calendar year, he added. The temporary occupancy permit should be issued for next summer when the museum can open to the public and all the renovations on the building begin next fall, Howell said. He also questioned the fall timeline, whether funds would be available for necessary works to complete the restoration work, or whether there would be even a special town meeting in November. More likely, the funds would have to be sought in the annual town meeting in May. Powers said a change to next summer would alter the pertinent facts now being worked on by Manley and Libby for the temporary permit. Your song sheet doesn't get us where we want to go, said Howell. It's not my song sheet. We're missing the singers, responded Powers. I'm becoming a little grumpy, said Linda Sabla, representing the Harwich Historical Society, pointing out as tenants in the building the group has not been part of the discussion. Sibula said the Society, together with the Brooks Academy Museum Commission, put together a page and a half of repairs that are necessary to get the Academy doors open again, as was requested in the stakeholders' session. Libby also directed to draft such a list, and they were to meld it together and costs assessed so funding could be sought in the town meeting. There's been no transparency or communication in the process, Sibula said. As for funding, Sibula suggested the town consider debt exclusion for the work, spreading over the cost over the next 30 years instead of using free cash. It's clear more answers are necessary, said Select Board member Jeffrey Handler. These include whether the building can be ready for temporary occupancy by the summer, whether the town can do all the necessary renovations at once, and whether a debt exclusion is the best means of funding work. Today's spotlight on Lower Cape personalities and visionaries. Matt Fitzpatrick strives to be Chatham's Renaissance man, by Ellen Chae. If you were to turn away from Wall Street to Cape Cod, how would you live life as a recovering stockbroker? Well, how about help a church become a center of green energy, pilot some 100-ton vessels, write 4 novels, and play in a rock band? These are what Matt Fitzpatrick has chosen to do with his time after he decided to leave the market. Fitzpatrick and his wife Jennifer split their time between Chatham and Falmouth. They winter on the Lower Cape. Fitzpatrick grew up in Lowell, where a library is named after his maternal grandfather, Samuel Pallard. He was a big influence, the light of my life, said Fitzpatrick, who has served on the library's board of directors. One of the board's fundraising projects was a series of Meet the Author events, and one of the authors was Dennis Lehane. Lehane's visit was a night that changed my life, said Fitzpatrick. The two had a little downtime together, and Lehane asked Fitzpatrick if there was a place in Lowell where they could talk over a pint. Fitzpatrick recalled replying that all we have in Lowell are pubs and funeral homes. Which would you rather go to? Later, of course, a pub. Fitzpatrick shared his fascination with writing with Lehane. At around the age of 12, I loved the books by Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary. Then I discovered Stephen King, and then I wanted to be a writer. My passion is to write, said Fitzpatrick. So what kind of writing does he like to produce? Nasty stuff, he answered without a pause. Twisted humor. And he added quickly, I love Godfather stuff, but I want to write something different. He credits a writer's symposium that he attended in Rochester, Vermont, with giving him the start to his 4-novel output. It looked like a set for The Sound of Music. We'd write all day and pitch to each other all night. He recalled of the session of reading aloud and friendly criticism that complemented the quiet days at the keyboard. That's how you learn, he added. So far, Fitzpatrick's literary output has resulted in Crosshairs, Matriarch Game, Demon Tide, and For Cynthia's Ride, the last name being his first book set in Chatham. He called the Yellow Umbrella bookstore his home base. Although the stories are not autobiographical, Fitzpatrick said that each book reflects what's going on in my life at the time. But he gets surprised by his own writing. Characters come to life at 3 a.m. like Frankenstein, he said. My books are R-rated, he said, for rough language, but not too crazy. I've interviewed real crime people to prepare for writing, he said. Then he mused, why do we love mob stories? Because they're just schmucks who pay taxes and get pulled over, but these guys don't do any of that. Yet Fitzpatrick has a couple of other sides besides the sly admirer of the ones who get away with murder. I wanted to be a Renaissance man, and I'd like to help people. So he's gone into the solar power business. His Saltworks Energy has worked with businesses such as the Mid-Cape Home Center, Mid-Cape Athletic Club, and Chatham's Redemption Rock Church to give them solar power. He also teaches particularly boating and water safety. I've always been a boater, and right now I have a 30-foot Grady, he said. His maritime skills he attributes to his paternal grandfather, who lived on the North Shore of Massachusetts. Chatham, he said, is probably the most challenging boating environment on Cape Cod. The weather is more intense, the sands are constantly shifting. I like to teach people how to navigate in such a setting. Safety and confidence equal enjoyment. He prefers powerboating to sailing, which is just too slow for his own taste. But he did observe that sailors are better mariners in general, and than the ones who use a motor. Chatham is notorious for a lot of weekend warriors, he said of the boating scene. Fitzgerald loves boating off Chatham because you can look around, you can see nature, sand. It's one of the most unique places in eastern Massachusetts. I hope it can be preserved. There's one more facet to Matt Fitzgerald. I'm an insane rock fan. Rock as in music. Yep. I play guitar, piano, drums, and bass. I've been in several bands, flashing the Metallica t-shirt he'd hidden beneath a button-down shirt that looked a lot more like it had come from the closet of a stockbroker he had once been. When I was about 9, I discovered the Beatles album, Sgt. Pepper, and I never looked back, he recalled. Reinvention is the theme of his life, said Matt Fitzpatrick, now in his second marriage and the father of a medical student and a marketing professional from a first marriage that ended in divorce. He said, when he was younger, I sought chaos. Now I want to inspire my kids. Town Ice purchase of Tonsett Road parcel. Recreation housing among potential uses for waterfront property by Ryan Bray. Voters at next month's special town meeting will be asked to support the purchase of a 2.2-acre parcel of land on Tonsett Road. The Select Board on September 10th unanimously voted to declare the parcel at 72 Tonsett Road a unique real property acquisition and to sign a purchase and sale agreement for the property. With the board's approval, an article will go to the October 28th special town meeting seeking $2.5 million to purchase the waterfront property, which neighbors seek Hall Farm. It's an incredible opportunity for the town to invest in maintaining a critical piece of character and history, while also providing recreational opportunities for the community, town manager Kim Newman said of the proposal in an email following the September 10th meeting. The Select Board has been discussing the purchase in executive session in recent weeks, including prior to last week's meeting. Michael Salatro, the town's special project coordinator, said the opportunity to purchase the parcel came through the conversations with the property owner and key boards and committees in town. 2 appraisals conducted in recent weeks put the value of the property at $2.5 million. The town plans to fund the purchase through the use of free cash or through existing stabilization funding if necessary. This is not taxation, Newman told the board. This is coming from reserves that you have already had on hand. The parcel currently houses a 2,237 square foot, 3-bedroom home with an attached garage, which Salitro said the town plans to keep. He told the Select Board the goal is to use the property for general municipal purposes, which could include recreation, conservation, housing, water access, water views, or as part of the abutting farm. It is not defined necessarily what will be done immediately, and it does not require or restrict any of the activities on the site, Salitro said. The unique designation under State Chapter 30B stems from the property's waterfront access and its ability to be used with other town-owned land to provide unique public recreational opportunities. The town has an October 2nd deadline to complete a property inspection, which would then be followed by an October 28th town meeting vote. If approved at the fall session, the town plans to close on the property by November 27th. Michael Herman of the Select Board complimented the town staff on their ability to move swiftly on the potential purchase. It really shows how you guys have been able to pull this together in such a short fashion, and how if we really want to get behind something, we can get things moving very quickly. Kevin Galligan of the Select Board heralded the potential purchase as an incredible opportunity for the town to adjoin Seacole Farm, which voters approved at a June 1987 town meeting that he said drew the attendance of more than 700 people. As Mike went through, "We see so many opportunities," he said, "but let's get control as we done with other parcels. Let's figure it out." Trust approves $605,000 for a West Harwich School project by William Galvin. The Affordable Housing Trust has approved $605,000 towards developer John Carey's multifamily building that will contain affordable housing units adjacent to the West Harwich Schoolhouse at 5 Bell Neck Road. Carey has approval to build 10 housing units on the property. 7 of the 10 units will be market-rate apartment rentals in the historic schoolhouse building, constructed in 1871. 3 affordable apartments will be in separate building on the property. Carey told trust members last week that the developers are not building multifamily developments anymore because the cost is too great and rental fees do not cover expenses. He made it clear that without financial assistance, he would not likely be building the 3 units of housing. In late July, Carey filed an application with the trust seeking $550,000 to assist in constructing the second building, which, as proposed, will have 2 one-bedroom units and 1 two-bedroom unit. He told trust members that they would be buying a deed restriction that will cap those rentals at affordable rates in perpetuity. Trust members are also attracted by the fact that the 3 units would be added to the town's state subsidized housing inventory, and once he pursues a state-long initiative program, all 10 units could be added to the SHI list, assisting the town in its goal to have 10% of housing in the community affordable. "Our community is desperate for year-round housing options," Carey wrote in his application to the trust. "Neighbors constantly come by and thank me for investing in West Harwich. If funded, I see the project as being catalyst for investment in all of West Harwich, restoring the proud town back to its former glory." Affordable Housing Trust Chair Larry Ballantyne recommended that the trust also provide a 10% contingency to Carey's request to make sure he has funds to finish the second building. Those funds are a reserve, he stressed, and any remaining funds upon completion of the project would need to be returned to the trust. Trust member Brendan Loney said that the contingency would be available to address unknowns such as unexpected utility or septic costs, but not to upgrade the quality of the products. The total projected cost of the second building is $938,000 according to the application, with Carey proposing to commit $385,000 to the project. Trust members approved the addition of a 10% contingency, with the understanding Carey would pursue the local initiative program, which requires the developer to work with the community to seek a friendly 40B permit appeals board. Carey committed to do so. The approval was said to be similar to that of the funding provided to the Harwich Fire Association, the restoration of the former fire station on Bank Street, at which 3 affordable apartment units are under construction. The trust voted to provide 50% of the funds to Carey in an initial deposit. 25% will come when the rough construction is completed, 15% upon final inspection, and the remaining 10% with occupancy certification. Carey said the trust approval will allow him to move forward in the near future with the construction of the second building. He hoped to have Cape Codders living in the units by the late spring. Carey told the trust his intention to retain the rental units as a landlord for the rest of his life. Regional panel upholds Brewster Barn denial. Property owner has option to appeal decision in court. By Ryan Bray. The regional Old Hings Highway Historic District Commission voted last week to uphold a prior decision from Brewster Committee to deny a request to build a hobby barn on Gage's Way. The regional committee on September 10th unanimously stood behind the Brewster vote, finding the proposed 29.8-foot tall barn planned for 136 Gage's Way was too large and out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. Brewster resident Van Drake initially went before the town's Historic District Committee in May with a request to build a barn, which he said he planned to use to store boats and potentially an RV. The barn's design called for a Stonington gray board and batten siding as well as a metal gable roof with solar panels. But the Brewster Committee on August 5th voted unanimously to deny the application because of the inappropriate size and style of the barn, especially compared to neighborhooding properties in the area of Harwich Road. The denial came after Drake withdrew his initial application and submitted a revised one to address the committee's concern. Drake appealed the decision to the Regional Commission shortly afterwards, claiming the Brewster panel exceeded its authority, exercised poor judgment, was arbitrary, capricious, and erroneous in its action, according to language in the appeal. At last week's hearing, Nathan Sally, the attorney representing Drake in the appeal, said that the Brewster Committee came into the application process ready to deny the project. Right off the bat, this was tainted with the premise that the application was a doomed project, he said. Sally also charged that the committee's chair, Jim Trabulsi, exerted too much control over the review process and had exceeded his authority as chair. He accused Trabulsi of dominating discussion on the project, taking over his fellow members, and in one instance disallowing one committee member from participating in discussion on the application. Trabulsi denied these charges and said that the member in question refrained from weighing in on the project because he had not caught up on what had happened in the previous hearing. We've been told time and time again by legal counsel, if you miss the first meeting, you really can't vote, he said. Trabulsi also denied accusations that he did not allow abutters the opportunity to weigh in on the application and that he was the only committee member to participate in a site visit of the property. Drake, meanwhile, said he felt forced by the Brewster Committee to withdraw and resubmit his application. He said he was led to believe that he had to do so in order for his application to be favorably approved. We got it done because I took it as a demand to move forward, he told the Regional Commission. Trabulsi said the initial application was withdrawn without prejudice, and that it was suggested that Drake refile an amended plan because the initial application failed to make reference to solar panels on the roof of the proposed barn. Discussion also turned to the nature of the neighborhood in question. Sally and Drake said the property is located along a stretch of Route 124 that should be considered a thoroughfare rather than a neighborhood. These properties along Route 124, which is the largest road in Brewster connecting Harwich to Brewster, Drake said. For them to say it's not a neighborhood, tell them to the abutters, Trabulsi responded. Letters from abutters Dean and Marion Saracen, in opposition to the proposed barn, were read into the record September 10th. They said the scale of the building will dwarf the surrounding residential buildings. The design presented would be more suited to a commercial zone or as an airplane hangar, the letter read. Sally further said that the Trabulsi doesn't take his job as chair seriously, an accusation that prompted a firm rebuttal from the Regional Committee Chair Bob Bohill of Dennis. He absolutely takes his job seriously, he said. To say anything to the contrary is simply not true. It's a slap in the face. Sally also challenged Trabulsi's repeated use of the word massive in describing the proposed barn. But Trabulsi defended the characterization last week, noting that the barn would be 15% bigger than the nearby Brewster store. He also said that at 42 feet wide, the barn as proposed would be wider than Route 6. The Brewster Committee also was critical of the proposed 21 by 14-foot size of the barn doors, Trabulsi said. Some of the overpasses on Route 6 aren't 14 feet high, he said. Regional commissioners also took issue with the proposed barn size, especially in relation to neighboring homes. Bob Wilkins of Yarmouth said that the inclusion of solar on the roof would have presented an issue in the project review. I think that would have been another issue to overcome in addition to the massiveness of the structure, he said. Wilkins also called any suggestion that Trabulsi worked to dominate the review process a stretch. Commissioner Pete Williams of Sandwich estimated the size of the proposed barn would be twice that of the abutting homes. Ron Medician of Orleans, meanwhile, erred on the side of the Brewster Committee's unanimous vote to deny. When the committee members vote 6-0, I think it's pretty clear in their minds that the structure is and how it does not fit into a particular setting. Following the hearing, Drake said he was disappointed in the Regional Commission's ruling, especially as he was moving towards an approval of the Brewster Committee as recently as July. I'm a little flabbergasted, he said. The points we made didn't seem to make an impression upon them. With the denial from the regional panel, Drake has the option of appealing the matter further in Orleans District Court. He would have 20 days from the regional panel's filing of his decision with the Brewster Town Clerk to make the appeal. But Drake said last week he was undecided as to whether or not he would appeal the decision further in court. Well, I've got stuff I got to store, and I'll build temporary structures. That's what I'm thinking about doing. Chatham tax rate drops as property values increase slows, by Tim Wood. For the first time since the pandemic, growth of the town's overall property values dropped below double digits, even as it topped out at more than $12 billion for the first time ever. As determined by the assessing department, the town's total valuation for the past year was $12,341,273,000, a 6.3% increase. The last time the increase in valuation was in single digits was in fiscal 2021, when it was at 1%. Annual evaluations reflect the previous year's property sales and new growth. After 2020, the increases surged as a result of heavy real estate sales during the pandemic. In fiscal 2022, values went up 10%. In fiscal 2023, the increase was 20%. And in fiscal 2024, values jumped 17%. Values are still going up, don't get me wrong, said Assessing Director Ardell Kelly, but they're not going up at the pace that they were. At a public hearing last week, the Select Board voted to set a single tax rate for all property classifications, following the recommendations of the Board of Assessors. The projected fiscal 2025 rate of $3.47 per thousand value is 10 cents lower than last year's $3.57 rate, which was the sixth lowest in the state. Most towns have not set a fiscal 2025 tax rate, but the new rate is likely to remain among the lowest in the state. Under state laws, officials can set different rates for residential and commercial properties, but the shift tends to make a big difference for commercial properties while having a smaller impact on residential tax bills. The board also voted to reject a tax exemption for property owned by year-round residents. Under recent changes to state law, the exemption can be as high as 50% for residential properties occupied by year-round residents. At a 10% exemption, the average savings would be $344. At 35%, $1,300. At 50%, $2,000, according to Kelly. Four Cape Towns, Provincetown, Wellfleet, Truro, and Barnstable, have adopted residential property tax exemptions. The Board of Assessors opposes doing so, which would shift the property burden to non-resident owners, according to Kelly. The housing bill that includes exemptions increase contains other options for promoting year-round housing, she added. Currently, 58% of the town's properties are owned by non-residents, Kelly said, with 42% owned by residents. That's her best estimate, she told the Select Board. The split was closer to 60-40 prior to the pandemic, she said. We're seeing actually more and more people moving into town. It'll be interesting to see if that trend continues or if it will stop. Target ship James Longstreet. Forgotten by few who ever saw her, unknown by most who came here now, the enormous Liberty ship we called the Target ship that once could be sighted hitting high above the waves has for years now disappeared from her final resting place. Her remains lie on the bottom in 20 feet of water off the Eastern and Orleans shore in Cape Cod Bay. At extreme low tides, a few of her bones can still be seen breaking just above the surface of the bay. How did this 460-foot Liberty ship, her three masts rising high above her desks, come to be here? Why and for what purpose? Well, let's go aboard, contact her ghost, and find out. First, how did the Longstreet come to be named? James Longstreet was one of the most important generals to serve the Confederacy during the Civil War. He was educated at West Point and served the United States military until the South seceded in 1861. General Lee, his friend and boss, called him my old war horse. Longstreet served in nearly all the vital actions during the war. He was opposed to the final attack, commonly referred to as Pickett's Charge, that spelled defeat for the South at the three-day Battle of Gettysburg. Unable to convince Lee of the futility of the attack, he organized and directed General Pickett in what turned out to be a suicidal charge. He was later held responsible unfairly for its failure. James Longstreet continued to serve the rebellious South for the rest of the war and lived a very long life, crossing his bar in 1904. Now we know a little bit of the namesake. What about the ship? Longstreet was a Liberty ship built for the U.S. military and to transport cargo for the war effort. Launching took place in the fall of 1942 from a shipyard near Houston, Texas. She was operated by a transportation company under contract to the military. She and her 70 or so crew and soldiers, who manned her defense guns, sailed on 3 different cruises to divergent ports in virtually all parts of the world. Her cargoes varied from Indian jute to high explosives, and she sailed both the northern and the southern hemispheres. She passed through the Panama Canal, sailed alone in convoys to Australia, India, and Europe. On her third and last sailing, she collided with a British ship in the thick fog outside of Halifax Harbor, Nova Scotia, Canada. Her damage was minor, and after repairs, she was again at sea. While heading into New York Harbor in ballast in the fall of 1943, she was caught in a tremendous gale and driven ashore at Sandy Hook, New Jersey. She was helpless and completely beached, where 30-foot seas pounded her until her back was broken. No crew were lost or injured. Salvage efforts refloated her, but she was declared a total loss, her keel and numerous bulkheads cracked and broken. She was laid up, mothballed, and awaited her fate in a Philadelphia boneyard. But before she was scheduled to be scrapped in 1944, the United States Navy decided to use her as a target ship in training exercises for early air-to-surface guided missile operations. After completion of her role in the missile project and several other target-for-hire assignments, the War Department made arrangements for her to become a permanent target hulk for the training of bomber crews in the Northeast. In 1945, she was subsequently towed to a shoal in Cape Cod Bay off Eastham, where she was scuttled, her keel finding bottom in 20 feet of water. She remained there as a target ship for air crews from Otis, now the Joint Base Cape Cod, as well as Quonset Point, Pease Air Base, and various other airfields around the Northeast. Propeller planes, usually trainers of low-endurance ratings, could be seen flying from our shores in slow dives above the Longstreet as pilots and bombing crews worked to synchronize the dive run with the release of pyrotechnic dropped from the makeshift bomb bay of the plane. Small puffs of smoke and a flash could usually be seen in the vicinity of the hull. I remember thinking how few of the bombs actually landed on the ship. My cousin, Jack Amoroso, who lived on Campground Road in Eastham, had a collection of unexploded bombs he picked up along the shore and hid from his parents, but showed us kids from time to time. An occasional unexploded bomb is still recovered by scallop or quahaug draggers out in the bay. They are treated with far more caution than was shown by my cousin Jack, now 93, survived his bomb collection. At the end of the use of the ship for training young flyers came in the early 1970s, but the Longstreet remained an attraction for tourists and sunset seekers until she finally tipped her hat for the last time in 1996. Time and tide wait for no man and no ship either. Storms and saltwater played havoc with her World War II-era steel. She lies below the waves, where an artificial reef she now hosts lobsters and fish. Her contributions lasted for longer than most Liberty ships, and is hoped she will long remembered. The Target Ship Goes to War by Noel Beale is a good source of additional information on the Longstreet. Library staffing problem can't be shelved. We hear a lot about problems of libraries these days. Most often it's issues about whether certain books are appropriate for young readers, challenges to books, especially those about gender and LGBTQIA+ identity. We're at an all-time high, and something to remember as we head into the Banned Book Week, September 22nd to 28th. Harwich Books Free Library is facing a different problem. It has had to close Mondays due to a staffing shortage. The situation isn't particularly unique. It's shared by many local businesses at this time of year, including ones that see seasonal staff depart for the school or year-round homes. Most businesses don't provide the same sort of service as a library, which serves an entire community, from toddlers to seniors, with a wide spectrum of materials, much of which is critical to the intellectual, social, and political life of residents. Think about how libraries kept us connected during the pandemic and how their programs and services range from education to entertainment, as well as keeping alive the ideals of a free society. Closing one day a week may seem like a minor thing at first glance, but any curtailing of library services has a cascading effect. Students who regularly use library facilities after school will be shut out. It may be the only day a senior has access to transportation to get to the library. We know the Brooks staff will do everything they can to accommodate folks impacted by the closure. But with 5 part-time vacancies on the 27-person staff, that means additional work for everyone, and the main reason for the one-day closure. Library Director Ginny Hewitt says the problem isn't one of funding, but in finding the people to fill the vacant positions. As with local businesses, this is becoming more and more difficult due to a confluence of issues, including high housing costs. The answer seems to be fewer part-time positions and more full-time staff. We encourage the town and library officials to work towards this goal, even if it means additional funding. Brooks Free Library, any library, is in our view worth it. Let's hope the closure is short-term and Brooks Library can swiftly return to its full schedule and its service to the people of Harwich.